The law of analogy is the silver thread which guides the student of Theosophy to perceive ever-widening and deepening vistas in nature and in man. Each vision engenders in him soul contentment, in which arises the joy of becoming the better able to help and to teach others. The law of analogy enables us to realize, as nothing else can, the logical sequence of the doctrine of the unity of nature. As the student proceeds, he not only begins to appreciate more and more deeply the wealth of analogy and correspondence which HPB has poured into her writings, but he finds that in his own mind a natural tendency of thought arises, through which he perceives analogy in many an instance of his everyday round of small plain duties. He also seeks to deepen his perception of those analogies which have come thus to birth within himself. What theosophist has not been thrilled when he has first discovered that man the microcosm is the mirror of nature, the macrocosm? And what earnest student has not been awed when later he has realized spiritual responsibility and the sacredness of reflecting the universal self? And so he casts about himself for ways and means to approach in thought and action this supreme analogy, and in accordance with the old story, he finds them close at hand. What is the most important aspect of his theosophical life? Not merely his membership in the United Lodge of Theosophists, but the fact that he constitutes an integral part of the life of that lodge. His sought-for analogy springs into his mind, the lodge the macrocosm, he the microcosm. How shall he work it out? He eagerly reviews what the lodge represents in his conception. He knows it to be a nucleus of souls, a spring from which should pour forth into the world the waters of wisdom, which alone can slake the soul thirst of man, which alone has the power to heal the wounds and to cure the ills to which humanity is heir. To embody an ideal, that ideal has to be acted out in 100 different ways, so that finally it may permeate every thought and action. To embody the idea of a lodge, its functions must be mirrored in ourselves. The primary function of a lodge is to serve as a focus towards which higher influences may converge, and from which theosophical information and spiritual influence may radiate. Its very fulfillment of that function depends upon the unselfish devotion of those responsible for the existence and maintenance of the lodge. It is obvious that by cultivating unselfish devotion, any individual member is serving the cause of Theosophy, both by strengthening his lodge and by making himself a channel for higher forces, insofar as his development permits. Those who can to any extent assimilate the Master, to that extent they are the representatives of the Master, and have the help of the lodge in its work. The lodge is a school of Theosophy. All of the study which a member devotes to preparation for classes or lectures strengthens this aspect of the lodge, and this quite irrespective of whether the student is to do the platform work himself. If even a few come prepared to listen intelligently on the basis of their own study at home, not only are they holding up the hands of the platform workers, but they are helping to place the whole meeting on a different and higher plane. The lodge's spread of the fundamental principles of Theosophy is not only in terms of public meetings held. Each student's individual study, even aside from preparation for specific meetings, helps that work on, provided only that his motive be to fit himself to be the better able to help and to teach others. Between his own studies and their application, and direct lodge work with fellow students, his field is limitless, the scope for self-devised and self-induced effort infinite indeed. Thus the student can reflect in himself the functions of the lodge, and make of his own life a training ground within the great school of Theosophy, so that Theosophy may become indeed a living power, in his life and in his lodge, and, through the lodge, in the community. In the conduct of the lodge, discipline plays an important part. Civic and state laws must be obeyed if traffic on the highways and side streets is to run smoothly. On the Theosophic path, forward, steady marching is attained only by obedience to lodge discipline. Meetings cannot begin and end on time if most members are unpunctual. Let the member observe the rule of punctuality in his life routine. Meetings cannot achieve their purpose if members do not adhere to the program agreed upon. A study class would drift into a conversation, a question-answer meeting become an open forum, and children's gatherings frivolous games. An earnest member is accurate and concentrated day by day, and thus acquiring the art of executing the work in hand in a thorough fashion, contributes substantially in checking any diffusive dilatoriness at the lodge meetings. The chief method of ULT work is to remain true to the doctrine implied in the verse of the voice of the silence. Thus have I heard. This habit of learning and memorizing true ideas for constant use in correct application should be maintained in affairs of life, and one excellent way of observing it is to memorize mantramic aphorisms from authentic theosophical textbooks and use them as occasions arise day by day. These aphoristic sentences are magnets and attract newcomers and inquirers to theosophy, as our own words do not, and the habit strengthens the principle of impersonality. In these and other similar ways, reproducing in our lives the principles observed in lodge work, we realize the truth of Mr. Judge's aphorism, each member a center. The declaration of the ULT is not only a document to be lived up to in the lodge, but also in the world, for whose service the great lodge exists.